and welcome to the week ahead reading for October 27th through November 3rd, so last full week of October. This is pre-recorded, as was channeled when I was doing my month ahead scheduling. I'll also be pre-recording next week's readings because I'm going to be traveling on November 3rd. Definitely be on the lookout for that and consider subscribing to my YouTube channel. That way you can get the alert when the video becomes available. But I'll be back to my regularly scheduled Insight Timer classes on November 5th. I'll be doing an astrology class that day, talking about the initial batch of transits. And as of the time of me recording this, I haven't channeled my November classes, but I will be doing that later today. So in the coming days, or likely by the time you are seeing this, my schedule will already be up so you can check out what I'm going to be doing in November. Today we'll be using the Moonchild tarot deck and the Moon deck, which are oracle cards. So we had a little bit of a combo. So as I'm recording this, I had already channeled the messages. I'm going to be going through my notes. So there won't be any recap section like in my normal readings, because in essence, this is a recap. I actually channeled this like a day or two ago. So these notes have been sitting and I just haven't sat down to actually record the video. So this will be a recap for me because I don't even remember what came through when I did this. So I have the cards already, and as I get to each of the points, when I, in real time, in my channeling, got to the cards and flipped them over and looked at them and then have my reactions, I will show them to camera. The light is a little bit bright here, so I'll have to be mindful of where I put it. It might end up being a little bit farther back, so just FYI, just has to do with the time of year, the time of day. A visual of like holding an itinerary. So we're checking our pockets, our bag, making sure that we have everything that we need. We're in the process of leveling up, and this feels like it's another training opportunity. So last week, if you haven't checked out those readings, definitely do that, because there really was a strong through line between the last week's collective readings and what came through this week. Like they're building off of what we did last week. So the two readings for the week of October 20th contained inspired actions so that we could find new ways of thinking and operating through this chapter ahead. We're being tasked with opening ourselves up to the world. So if you remember, we had a collective reading about tuning out the noise and like not receiving new information, new stories, whether through shows, news, people, even reading certain types of books. So we were turning our focus inward and practicing listening to ourselves. The word of the week this week for reading number 1 is discernment. So now that we are journeying out of our bubble, so remember the initial image, we were like, what's our itinerary? Like, where are we going? We were en route somewhere. So we have to practice raising and lowering that shield of protection and deflecting what doesn't align with us. You can think of it more simply as boundaries. So based on what we learned about ourselves last week, whatever lessons came up for you, we're allowing in what supports us and what brings us opportunities for growth, joy, and happiness. And this brings us to the first card that we got, which was from the Moonchild tarot deck. And this is the Temperance card. This is a very, very light card. And as you can see here, this is all about balance. It's balancing the masculine and the feminine. So she's holding a blue cup and a pinkish reddish cup. I was laughing when I flipped this card over because not only is it about balancing the external versus the internal, but it's a little hard to see here. There's a light that is coming out of her chest, like from her heart space. And it's like allowing that light within us, our intuition, us listening to that voice from last week, what we have uncovered and discovered through our decision making. So you have option 1, you have option 2. Is it in? Is it out? Is it supportive? Is it not supportive? Is it aligned? Is it unaligned? And that is the discernment piece. So we're having to follow our essence, our understanding, and then making sure that what we choose aligns with us at our core, which is exactly what we were just talking about. And this is allowing us to create a sense of harmony. So the vision for this week is really to trust our inner voice, the knowledge of our most authentic selves and instilling the balance in our environment. So where last week we were tuning out a lot of our environment and just focusing on ourselves, now that we are re-engaging with the world around us, we're practicing, again, that discernment of allowing in versus not. And just to kind of define here of like what discernment means, if you're like, I don't know what that word means. So it's about our ability to pay attention to finer details, have accurate perception of what is going on, and comprehension. And when we know that, so when we're paying attention to like what things actually are versus what they aren't, and perceiving them accurately, like, okay, that's what that is not. That information allows us to be guided forward in our decision making and as relates to boundaries and balance. For reading number 2, the first language that came in was flip the script. This is a very, very different vibe than the first reading. And we're turning things on their head and interacting with them. So similar in that contrast from last week where we were doing a lot of filtering and self-protection, we are more active, engaged for both readings this week. So for reading number 2, the week of the 20th, we were getting curious and we were asking questions. So we were not trying to ask them from a place of understanding, but from the mindset and perspective of curiosity. And so what we are having this week is a continuation of that effort of asking questions. And specifically, we're doing this in a way that, quote, allows us to ask strong questions because we are challenging what we are seeing. So now that we are a little bit out, reconnected with the environment, we have to ask questions that are challenging because the word of the week for reading number 2 is assessment. So we are assessing for the truth. I had 2 cards, one from the Moon deck and one from the Moonchild tarot deck. And what came through is that the first card would tell us about that truth that we are seeking and what it is for us to focus on. And that card from the Moon deck is the Earth card. I am of the earth and in harmony with nature. So a little hard to see here, but this is in fact a green card. It's completely washed out. There we go. And this made me laugh because if you remember the second reading for last week, it was talking about nature. There was that component woven in there. And I had even given this example of the types of questions that we were asking last week being related to seeing a tree and wondering, how did that tree come to be there? How long has it been there? And so the fact that now it's talking about like us being of nature as well, like this really does feel like a continuation of last week, but it is a subtle pivot because with this card being an affirmation, again, this was the only one in the 2 readings that was using the Moon deck, which has a lot of the time, not always, but having these I am statements. So this was really tying it back to that fundamental truth that we are of nature. We're connected to nature. We are beings, human beings, not doings, human doings. So there is continued encouragement to stay connected to nature, but also not just literal nature, so connecting to it, but our own personal nature. Who are you within your own body, which was made by nature? How do you take up space within nature, within your environment? How do you move through the world, your surroundings? How do you engage with others, also of nature? Whether people, whether animals, whether the planet. And how can you infuse more harmony and peace across the board in all of those spaces? So option to work on these many journal prompts that came through to reflect on those types of insights and the dual meanings of nature in the situation. In addition to asking really direct questions. For our second card from the Moonchild Tarot deck, the prompt that I got for it is that it would tell us where we are by the end of the week, either Sunday or Monday, like depending on your time zone. By us taking this action to ask these kinds of questions and move into this different headspace. So the card that we got was the Four of Swords. See, there we go. And the Four of Swords is all about allowing your mind to rest. You can see she has 3 swords up top, and then she has one that is resting, and she's in a meditative position. Also, what made me laugh, she's out in nature too. And it's because you could be slipping maybe into overthinking or being overworked, like asking too many questions. It's like the fine line here. We don't want to go overboard, and we still want to remain connected to peace and grounding. And so this really comes across like the extreme end of the low vibrational energy of asking too much and engaging our mind swords too much. So we have to take a pause, and as all this information is coming in, really allow our minds the space to process it accordingly. And then as we can unwind, we'll find our footing again in the stillness of this space. For the analysis, I wanted to start with a quick check into the astrology for the week. So after I had channeled these readings, I looked at the upcoming transits for the week ahead and wanted to see if there was anything that related to what we were talking about. And number one, Mercury was like doing a lot for a chunk of this week and like making a lot of aspects to different planets that are going to be all across the zodiac in different areas of your chart. So the fact that between reading 1 and reading 2, we did have a lot of mental activity similar to last week, it does check out. So just to quickly recap those, we have a trine to Neptune, ingress into Sagittarius. So that's like shifting our thinking into bigger picture of the information processing, or that's very expansive or inquisitive and connected to the universe. And that really does tie to both readings. So connected to your intuition, connected to nature, the environment, like what is bigger. A trine to Neptune in Pisces, opposition to Uranus in Gemini, sextile to Pluto in Aquarius. That's all happening from the 29th into the 30th. So we have this big kind of one after the other blast of Mercury activity. And in the bigger picture, having Mercury be activated so much this week checks out with the fact that reading 1 was about decision making. It's the mind. We have to think. We are practicing discernment. What's for us, what's not for us. That fully requires that mental activation. And then for the second reading, asking all of those questions. So really like thinking about the mental load as well too. So what is the mind doing? How is it being engaged? And then are we getting kind of tired and exhausted by the end of it? And the other thing that I wanted to know astrologically is that when this comes out, so at the start of this week on the 27th, the moon is going to be in Capricorn, which is the cardinal earth sign. And that, of course, fits with all of this like discussion of earth and nature energy that we had for the second reading. So I thought that was a fun little touch. Now, on to actually analyzing the content of the readings themselves. The biggest piece across both of them was this idea of harmony. So for number 1, I mean, she's not a scale, but she's talking about balancing. This is the discernment piece. This is a very, very symmetrical image. So there was a lot of call for harmony, call for energetic alignment, balance between you, internal and external. And then in the second reading, it's like we're at harmony, literally said it on here, at harmony with Earth. And then here, this was about finding the balance. If we swing too wide, we go too far with the questions, then we have to return to stillness to find the balance again. I mentioned this a little bit earlier for the second reading, how we have, this is literally the Earth card. And then even though this is an air sign, the swords being the air element, this woman is sitting in nature. And in fact, you can see there's all of these little drawings around here. And I thought that they kind of looked similar to this card, like the different leaves. So even though we have 2 different decks, they're speaking about what you might think are different things. The fact that they were paired together in this way, like maybe look at this card differently because of the pairing that we had. talking about those big themes for the week. So we had discernment for the first reading and assessment for truth for the second reading. So the former, in many ways, is very intuitive, which, as we know, we have the light coming from the center. It's like her essence that's informing her decision making, informing, creating the balance. And the assessment piece for the second reading is kind of like the scientific method, like what we use in nature when we're asking all those questions and we're in a state of inquiry. So I thought that that was kind of a funny like parallel we had going on with the images. But between both of them, the idea of connection is really at the core. So last week we had that as well, but the connection was fully about like connecting to ourselves in a very specific way. And then for both of these, it was the connection that we have with the surroundings and calling back to what is most aligned and centered for us, really in both circumstances, because there's a way to have an extreme and go like a little bit too far. And there's a way to choose something that is not aligned for you. And maybe in some ways, there's a little bit of an overlap and intersection there. So this time, instead of choosing what calls to us, so are you more drawn to reading number one? Are you more drawn to reading number two? I talked about that a lot last week. Like maybe you really like the idea of being in reading one or reading two, or you recognize that the healing of reading one versus reading two is really what you need right now, most suited. For this week, it came across like this wasn't necessarily discernment. This wasn't about you choosing. It was more about like just stumbling into it. And the recommendation came through to listen back to this, like check back in by Wednesday, because by then it'll be much more obvious to you which reading you're actually in. And then you can listen to hear the guidance for the respective reading that is for you a little bit more clearly. So if you're listening to these collective readings and you're not totally sure where you fit, that doesn't feel like a surprise. It feels like it's kind of expected for the bulk of people. And what you think you're leaning into might not actually be where you land by the end of the week. Thank you for listening. And again, I'm going to be doing another pre-recording for next week's collective readings. So check for that. And I'll be dropping a bunch of other videos on my YouTube channel. I've been working through my backlog of individual psychic readings, some astrology readings, Ask Me Anything type formats. So there's a lot that's going to be dropping throughout this week, even though I won't be doing any live classes. So check those out. Leave comments. Let me know if you have any questions. And of course, as always, if you're interested in receiving a reading, whether it is a psychic reading with cards, without cards, or an astrology reading of the many varieties that I have, definitely head over to my website. You can get those details. And don't be shy. Message me if you have questions. You're like, hey, I'm super curious, but I don't really know where to start, or I don't know what is a good fit for me. I can help steer you based on what it is that you're looking to learn about yourself or what you want to develop or just to better understand in general. If you are curious to learn to develop your intuition more, learn about astrology as a tool, I have several products in my shop. Some are also free or discounted, and I have resources, of course, on my YouTube channel. And then I am also doing mentorships for both modalities. So I have one-off 2-hour sessions. You can just book ad hoc if you want to develop your intuition with me, ask me questions. We can meditate together, and I can read you and provide some guidance there. And then I also have 4-month mentorships. We can meet every month and come up with a whole little plan for checking in and developing your skill set more. On the astrological side, I have a 3-month and 6-month personal transit mentorship. So if you want to understand not only just your chart, because we can cover many, many components of your chart across the readings that I have, but the personal transits allows you to really get a step into understanding your chart through the lens of the present moment, not just as the snapshot of what the cosmos kind of say or suggest about you for your entire lifetime. But the transits help you understand what are transits that have passed, what are transits of the present, what are transits in the future. And when you're future thinking, you can consider how to be prepared based on your personal astrology. So if you want to just go a little bit deeper or much deeper in understanding how to work with the planets in transit, then those are really great options. So if you have questions about any of my offerings, please do reach out. And I am going to be recording a video, some sort of a demo this week on my new calendar, my 2026 calendar and guidebook, just giving some examples of working with it so you have a better understanding of that. But details on that on my website as well. And I'm really excited about using that because I created a planner for 2025 and I've used that this year. And I feel like this is really a great like level up and more infused and integrated into my life. And if you're somebody who is busy and is like, I don't have time to like learn astrology or practice my intuition, like I don't know where to fit this in, this is a really, really great tool because it just kind of pops up in your calendar or it's embedded in your calendar. So it's there if you ever want to reference for planning. And it also guides you on learning astrology. So there's instructions on how to look at your chart, where to look in your chart, and then interpretations so you can continue to have like as many reps as you want, even if you only do it for certain types of transits or you decide to do it for all of them, or take it, all these layers deep. So those are really great tools for practicing working with divination, doing manifestation work, and then learning about the different archetypes and what certain astrological events mean and the nature of them. So definitely recommend you checking that out. That is available in my shop now. Yeah, I know I'm not going to be seeing you live until November, but you will see me on your feed throughout this week, and I'll be back on the 3rd for another pre-recorded reading for the week ahead. So thank you so much and have a great week, final week of October.